Welcome to Sports Management Podcast, where you will hear interesting sports management professionals share their stories, experiences, and passion for the sports management industry. I am your host, Marcus Philipsson. Today's guest is a former football referee, an entrepreneur, businessman, and an author. As one of the best referees in the world, this 47-year-old has been on the largest stages of football, including World Cup and European Championship. 3 times he was awarded Best Referee in Sweden, and in 2010 he was ranked top 10 of all referees globally. In 2018, he decided to retire his whistle, something he speaks openly about in his new book. It's my great pleasure to welcome Jonas Eriksson.
Thank you so much for having me in the show.
I'm very happy to have you here. So first of all, how are you?
I'm fine. It's been a special start of a new year, of course, given the COVID-19 situation on a global basis. I've had COVID a few weeks ago myself without even noticing it. And then, as always in January, new things are taking off, new projects are starting, new meetings are launched. So it's been a hectic start of the new year, but in hindsight, I know I enjoy when it's a lot of things to do. And this year started off in a very offensive and positive way.
I'm glad to hear, and I'm glad to hear that you're well also considering COVID. You have a very interesting history, and that's why I wanted to speak with you. So first of all, you have had in your youth, you had some dreams to become a journalist. You were a football referee, obviously. And also you are quite the entrepreneur. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how your career started off?
Yeah, so I was born in the north part of Sweden in a small town called Luleå, 65,000 people, a lot of snow in the winter, a very good ice hockey team, a good basketball team, but very poor soccer team. Soccer was my main sport, which I followed. And I played football and had a dream of becoming a professional football player, like every kid, more or less. But I realized at the age of 16, 17 that actually I would probably become a better referee than a player. So I decided to focus more on the refereeing side. In parallel, I had a dream of becoming a sports journalist. So I worked for the local newspaper and managed to combine the role of being a sports journalist and a referee and a player. And sometimes I even wrote articles about matches that I officiated as a referee, which was maybe from a journalistic ethical point of view could be discussed, but I made it at least. And then I moved to Stockholm at the age of 19 to make my military service. And my time as a conscript, I was a journalist. I know it sounds a bit weird, but that was possible in those days. And when I moved to Stockholm from Luleå, I had 2 ambitions or 2 dreams. The first one was to move back to Luleå as soon as possible. The second was to study in university. And now, it's 28 years ago, I haven't moved back to Luleå, and I have still not studied 1 minute in university. So life took off in another direction. Mainly it took off in another direction because I met up with some fantastic people along the way. I worked for the biggest daily newspaper in Scandinavia called Aftonbladet for some time. And after that, I worked for a consultancy called OTW Media. And then in 1998, I met up with a few friends that had looked into the future, that talked about digitalization of broadcast rights, that they would be having a higher value in the future, and that people would not only consume media through television, but also through internet. And internet in 1998 was something that, well, it didn't exist more or less. But I enjoyed the presentation they gave, and I decided to join them. The company was called IEC, and I joined the company in 1998. We were very small. We had 10, 15 Swedish million crowns turnover. And I stayed in the company until 2010. And during those years, we had a fantastic journey. We sold the company first time in 2001 and did a management buyout in 2003. And then we sold it again in 2007, which was a fantastic journey. And we opened up 5 offices around the globe, and we have 60, 65 people working all together with a great team. But in parallel, I was refereeing football. So I could be one day in Monte Carlo on a Sportel convention selling my broadcast rights. And the following day, I could travel home to Gothenburg to officiate at the Ullevi Stadium. And then I was traveling to Dubai the following day to sell my portfolio of broadcast rights. But in 2010, I realized that if I wanted to reach the top, which I wanted as a referee, I realized I have to focus on the refereeing side. So with that said, I left IC and I took up a job as professional referee at the Swedish FA. And 2 years later, in 2012, I made my big debut as a one of the big finals, Euro 2012 finals in Poland and Ukraine. And then I had a few fantastic years, 2013, 14, 15, 16, and 17. I had big championships, global championships every year until I hung up the whistle in 2018. So I worked with sports all my life. I played football, I refereed football, I've sold broadcast rights, I've consumed football as a viewer, and I've had sports as a common denominator throughout my career, which I'm really happy when I look back on today.
That's quite a journey. It's really impressive. And as I mentioned before, you have written a book about this that is called The Card House, direct translation from Swedish. I don't know if it is translated.
Well, we're having discussion at the moment that the plan is that it will go internationally. We cannot call it House of Cards because everyone who knows a little bit of Netflix or consumes media, House of Cards has been taken from a legal point of view. So we will have to find another name. And House of Cards, the name, I wrote a synopsis and I sent to my co-writer. We didn't have a name for the book, and I sent it to the publisher, actually, it was. And she said, well, what you've written here is terrifying. It reminds me of House of Cards, but it's in the world of football. And then it struck me that, House of Cards in Swedish, Korthuset is a good name to be used. And then we went through, well, it's a good name because it describes how a refereeing career is. Gradually, step by step, you build up your House of Cards, and one day, without any notice, it goes down instantly. And that's exactly what happened to me in my refereeing career as well.
Yeah, and it can also be referred to yellow and red cards, obviously, that you have used during your career.
Absolutely. You have that picture as well, which you could have a look at.
Speaking about the book, you are really, really honest about your experience as a referee and how it was in UEFA and FIFA and these organizations that they haven't operated as should many times. And this part of the book was really interesting to me. This podcast has a partnership with SIGA, which is the Sports Integrity Global Alliance. So the integrity of sport is very important and something that I try to emphasize on this podcast. So your story really, really spoke to me there. So would you like to talk a little bit about that aspect of how it was in UEFA and FIFA?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I mean, for me, being transparent, neutral, trustworthy, have extremely high integrity is important for any official in any game. And with that goes that the right referee should officiate the right match. It should be selected on merits, not on who you know, what country you come from, not that someone decided before the game who should officiate a final in the tournament. But I discovered during my career that the refereeing side, who's supposed to be neutral and have a high level of integrity, isn't working like that. It's very much so that depending on what country you come from, who you know, what network you have, will decide who will officiate the best matches. The marks that they give, they're not official. They're also subjective, which means I could give you a mark when you referee a match, and that could be changed because there's people centrally who then could adjust the marks lower or higher, depending on if they want you to succeed or not. And as these marks are not official, nobody could see it. But during the career, I saw my marks a number of times. I saw how they were changed because of technical errors or software which didn't correspond to the demands that UEFA had. So I could see that my mark was one when the observer had given me, and then it was lowered 5 days later when I received the mark without any comments. So I knew people were manipulating the marks. And I knew also that people were manipulating the marks to a higher level because sometimes they wanted a referee from certain countries to achieve certain positions or gain that. So that happened. And for me, I enjoy sports because the team with not so high quality could beat the team with 11 stars. It's a matter of the teamwork you put in and that you don't know how a match will end. It's fantastic. The uncertainty of the game is something that really drives. That's why I sit down in front of the TV to watch football matches or ice hockey or handball, whatever. But when it comes to refereeing, knowing that everyone knows who will officiate the final before the tournament, regardless of how she or he performs, that's not good. And when I felt this, it came stronger and stronger in my career. I discovered it during my career, but then I was so focused on achieving the best in every match and believing that my performances would get me to the next level. Well, as it didn't happen then, I gave up eventually, and I decided to hang up the whistle half a year before, because I had to retire at 45. That's when the age limit comes as a referee.
So did you feel like you had an unfair disadvantage that because you came from Sweden, which is not a powerful country, neither in football nor in politics, I would say?
Yeah, absolutely. I probably had advantages as well if you compare to even smaller countries. I mean, I spoke to referees from countries which are, Sweden is still ranked number 16, 17, or 18 in the world. We have representation in the executive committee since 3 years, but still we're a small country. Yes, I felt that really. And if you ask any referee from any smaller countries like Sweden or even smaller, they would say definitely on that. No, they wouldn't say it, because if they would say it, they would be disqualified for coming matches. And if they say it after their career, they wouldn't be eligible for becoming an observer or an instructor or travel with the UEFA suit around Europe. So that's why nobody talks about it. I've made a decision for myself that I will not work with UEFA on these premises. That's why I've been able to tell the truth. And knowing me and my background, when we sold the company, I made more money than can spend for the rest of my life. So I'm financially safe, which means I could tell the truth, which very few of my colleagues, or to be honest, none of them dare to say. But all of them, they know exactly how it works.
Yeah, which also speaks to the lack of transparency, obviously, in the whole organization. But as you said, you have the financial means, you are set, so to speak, and that you didn't have to do the refereeing for financial reasons. You did it because you are competitive and you wanted to be the best.
Absolutely.
But you didn't share your story until you had retired as a referee. Did you feel like if you did it when you were active, then your chances would be zero?
Absolutely correct. And it wasn't even that I decided, I didn't tell it, 1 week after or 2 weeks. It took me 3 years, 3.5 years, because I had to be sure I don't want to work with international refereeing again. And when I knew that, and when I made the decision, I decided to speak more open on these topics, because in any culture, if you reveal or you say, it's a culture within international football where you're not supposed to give interviews. You're not supposed to tell what's happening behind the scenes. The former president of the UEFA's referees committee and the vice president of FIFA, Angel Villaleona from Spain, he said that the best interview is the one not given. The best word said is the one not spoken. And this was repeated every course as a good example of, you should never talk to journalists. You should never reveal what's happening. You should never open Pandora's box and tell about things. Just keep things for ourselves. And I've done everything else. I've said exactly what happened to me. I haven't revealed things about my colleagues or anything that could damage them. I've described the incidents that happened to me and the learnings I've had and the evidence that I've seen from the perspective I've had during my 18 years at the highest level.
Something that I noticed in your book also was the extreme pressure that you're under, not only from like fans and TV and everything, but internally from your supervisors and within UEFA. And that you mentioned before with the rankings, that literally like one mistake in a game of 90 plus minutes could, ruin a career. And if you look on the player side, how many missed passes or missed goals are made during a game? And in your profession, when you were a referee, you couldn't make one mistake.
That's true. One mistake could stop your career. That's the truth. As a referee, you don't look for positive things. You only look for mistakes. I was used to that. I knew this was the case, but the pressure was high, and the pressure was high internally, because sometimes when mistakes happen, which players commit mistakes, a referee as well, you could be afraid of the consequences. How would this affect me? Would I get another chance? Could I referee another match? Or will this hinder any kind of possibility for me to referee or officiate the matches that I would like to in the future?
This episode is sponsored by InSport Education, the online business school for sport. They offer a range of different courses, for example, Foundations of Sport Business, Private Equity in Sport, and much, much more. As a listener to this podcast, you get 10% off all of their courses using the code SportsManagementPodcast10. Click the link in the description below and sign up today. Another part with regards to this was that you needed to be in a very good physical shape. You have shared some pictures also, and you describe it in the book with that you had like kind of a weigh-in.
Yeah, I'm the first one to support and second the fact that referees should look like athletes. 20 years ago, you could see the referee in the middle, usually 10 years older than the oldest player and with rather big belly, standing in the mid-circle, not moving, not looking like an athlete. So I'm the first one to say the referees should be athletic, should be athletes, and they should look like the players, although they're older, which usually corresponds. On the other side, if you want to comment on referees, how they should develop themselves, there's many ways to do it. And within the refereeing, the weighing sessions, they were conducted in a terrible way for men and for women. I know several referees that had problems with this and that did absolutely not enjoy it. And I think that this really created an atmosphere where people couldn't be themselves, where people had to stand more or less naked in front of each other to do the weighing sessions, calculating the fat percentage, dividing people into categories. It wasn't pleasant to know that you were poor or very poor because of your fat percentage. It wasn't body shaming, absolutely. And of course, you could criticize a referee for being heavy or having too much of fat percentage, but you could do it in different ways. You don't have to tell people in front of others that they need to do it. You don't have to post the fact that they are poor or very poor. I think the leadership is about communicating in many different ways to get the message across.
Definitely. And leadership is something that is often discussed on this podcast. And the person in charge here was Colina, which as a referee is one of the best ever. But obviously maybe not the best leader in this case. So can you speak a little bit about leadership, both like from your point of view, what you think is a good leader and what wasn't in Colina and Busaka's case?
Yeah, I think that a good leader understands the need of different person, which means that if I like to train extremely hard, maybe not that same thing will not apply for all the referees. Some referees like to train in a certain way. Some people like to eat 2 hours before the match. Some referees like to eat 5 hours before the match. It's individual sport after all. You cannot force everyone to do. But Colina was the best referee of all times. Absolutely. He was a great leader on the field of play. But all the good qualities he had on the field of play, they didn't correspond when he left the field of play. When you lead people in an organization, you need to be humble, you need to listen, you need to give people the feeling of that you dare to make a mistake, which wasn't the case. I'm also a strong believer that you have to have people being able to speak up and say things and comment or challenge each other to get the best possible decisions made, regardless if it's a company or federation or any kind of organization. But during my years, I never heard anyone, adults, people, no one challenged anyone because people were looking down, nodding, saying yes. Even if someone said, well, this shirt is red and I'm now wearing a blue shirt. Someone would say, well, hey, your shirt is actually not red, it's blue. Well, if this happened during referee courts, well, this is a clear free kick and nobody thought it was a free kick. Everybody said, okay, yes, because you didn't question, you didn't challenge, you didn't develop yourself. You just kept quiet and didn't say anything.
So if we talk a little bit about your leadership style on the field, because you are there to lead the game. There are 22 alpha males competing.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of emotions going on. How do you handle this?
Well, I think it's a matter, for me at least, when you see people on the field of play, you have to realize you have 22 personalities. The same laws of the game have to apply for all of them, but you have to treat them individually. If someone does not like you to shout at him, don't shout at him unless it's absolutely not necessary. If one player wants to talk a lot because that makes the player performs better or feel better, let him talk. If you have a player who's the leader of the team, maybe you should not confront him, challenge him, or come to a position where you face him in front of the others, because if that player loses his face, you will lose the rest of the team. I mean, it's so much about individual handling of people, leadership, and not to go from who you yourself are. It's more or less to understand that everyone acts differently on the field of play. If you referee the Zlatan, Messi, or Ronaldo, they're excellent football players, but their personalities are absolutely different. You can't compare them because they have different abilities, qualities, and you need to understand this. In the same way as the best football teams contains of, you can't have 11 Leo Messi or 11 Zlatan Ibrahimovic or 11 goalkeepers. You need to have a mixture of players with different abilities and qualities. That's how you create the best team. And understanding this is a key aspect, but never leave the line of what laws of the game says. That has to be clear. Everyone has to follow it, whether you're a star like Ronaldo or you're a player who just started to play in a team, making your first match in Champions League.
Of course, and that's easier said than done, I guess, with the rules, because a lot of rules are interpreted and you need to make a decision, and it goes very fast out there. But I know that there are different personalities, as you said, but is there any difference in leading or refereeing Messi versus a less profile player?
Well, it is. Messi is probably far quicker and running in a higher speed and more difficult to follow. But when it comes to laws of the game, of course, the same thing applies to everyone who's in the field of play. And I think that that's a key for all the leaders. You cannot have players being given individual treatments when it comes to laws of the game. If Messi makes a gesture, well, he has to be cautioned, given the yellow card, as well as the player that you never met before. That indicates that you're a leader that really follows a line. It gives consistency, which is important, uniformity, and the referee becomes trustworthy and credibility by managing the player in such a way.
We should say also that the referees, you are also a team. You are not alone out there. You have your linesmen and
correct.
You are 4 or 5, right, in total?
Well, depending on, but nowadays you are a team of 4, but you have the VAR team, which then is a few more in the OB truck sitting there collecting images and be able to advise you along the route.
So how is the cooperation there with you and the rest of your team?
Well, the cooperation is extremely important. I had a tremendous team with colleagues that I could bring into the team because I knew I could trust them. I knew that they were willing to learn, to improve, and they always were more than welcome to challenge me. Although it was tough sometimes when they shouted, "Come on, Jonas, you're lazy today." That was because they wanted me to improve. And you need to tell your boss sometimes that he needs to improve. Because sometimes I was lazy. And sometimes if I didn't think I was lazy, I ran 10 meters more just to show them I'm not lazy. But they wanted my best. They wanted the team to succeed. And I always think that you should have a mentality and a spirit where you could challenge your colleagues, because if you challenge your colleagues, you for sure will perform better and better along the way. I'm 100% sure that would happen.
And how does the preparation look? I know that in ice hockey, they usually kick football.
Yeah.
Like kick the ball around and try to keep it in the air for as long as possible.
Yeah.
Are there any specific warm-up routines were going on in your team?
Well, I would say everyone is different in different ways. Well, me and my team, we listened to music. I was doing some stretching, some light movement in terms of flexibility in the dressing room. We never had any football in the dressing room. That could probably damage 1 or 2 of us. But it's a matter of finding your individual routine, what works for you and what works for other people, and then trying to stick with that.
Any superstitions, like tying your left shoe before the right and so on?
Absolutely, there were superstitions. We all had our little things. I didn't have one thing only. When I left the dressing room, I usually had the ball in my hand, and if I didn't have it, when I left the dressing room, I always tied my shorts one extra time to make sure that they were there. And then it was like ignition. Now the match could start. I was ready to get the game starting.
Yeah, as we said, it's an incredible career, and you finished it in 2018, and you have kept busy since. And as we talked about before, for financial reasons, you don't have to, and you are still going strong. You are an entrepreneur. You are running several gyms, paddle courts, and a lot of other projects. So first of all, now after your football career, referee career, what do you do, and what is it that keeps you going?
Well, I will answer the second question first. What keeps me going is curiosity and what will happen next. How far could I come with the companies? How could I change the society where I'm living? How could I find new products that looks into the future? What could I do when I stop working in 30, 40 years? What have I achieved at that time? So I'm curious. I think that's why. I've always been having a full agenda, and I enjoy having a lot of things to do. Sometimes it's a little bit too much, but that's what makes me going. And today I was recording Dragon's Den, Draknästet in Swedish, a TV show that was broadcast on TV in September and October last year. It will come back this year, 2022 again. So I work with a few of these companies. I've invested in a few other companies since before. I have the gyms that you mentioned. I give lectures, presentation in various different companies, dinner speeches, etc. And I also work as a pundit, as an expert for SVT, Swedish Television, for their big football championships. And as always, I have a few questions coming up, and I've decided that 2022, I will not accept everything which is on the table. So I have a lot of questions, but I will be a little bit hesitant to say yes. I will wait and see, because I have so many things I want to do, and I know that it's quite easy to block the calendar by saying yes too many times. So I want to keep it open. I have a few questions at the moment, and I'm sure there will be a few more coming up. I'm in a privileged situation where I don't have to apply, where I don't have to go and find companies. I have a lot of people trying to contact me, so that's truly a privilege. And I try to stay in good shape, run, go yoga, go CrossFit, go strength training, play paddle, not at least. So cross-country skiing these days now when it's possible. So I try to find different ways of keeping myself in good shape.
It sounds like you're busy. And the Dragon's Den, for the American listeners, that would be the equivalent of Shark Tank, right?
Yes, exactly. Dragon's Den in Japan and England and in Sweden as well. But in the US, Shark Tank. But it's the same concept, the same mentality, and the same setup in total, yes.
That's very interesting. So approaching the end, if you could give some advice to young people who want to pursue a football referee career, what would you tell them?
Don't hesitate. It's the best leadership education you could find, because you will have to always make decisions. You have to stand up for your decisions. You have to work hard, physically keep in great shape. You have to handle so many different personalities under a lot of pressure. And the feeling you have when you leave the field of play, when you referee 22 players, made 300 decisions in 90 minutes, and nobody talks about your performance. That adrenaline, that endorphin, wow, it's amazing. You will love it. And when you start to get bits and pieces of this, you want to have it again and again and again. And if you're successful, if you work hard, you're dedicated, well, it may take you to the World Cup. It may be your profession. And you'll have memories for the rest of your life, which no one could take away from you. And you cannot buy this experience whatsoever.
The leadership training, I'm sure it's great, as you said. But isn't it a bit frustrating as a referee, as you said there, that when you make the perfect game, no one notices you? It's not like when you're the player, you make a hat trick or something, and then everyone talks about you. When the referees make a perfect game, then no one talks about you.
Absolutely spot on, yes. But you know that when you start as a referee, it's not a surprise that comes, halfway to your career. Oh, this is the case. Well, you know that this is what's happening. You will not get the appraisals, positive comments. People say, hey, you're great. No. People will just accept your match if you don't make any mistakes, in their view, you have to say, because it's easy to make mistakes from what they consider being a mistake. It may not be a mistake in the referee committee, as an example, because it could be against their favorite team, and then you could be disqualified for the rest of your career.
I see. If you could choose the next guest on this podcast, so someone from the world of sports, who do you think that I should talk to?
I think from the world of sports, I think it would be interesting to hear a little bit more on those who are at the highest level of IOC. How do they reflect today? China, how do they see upon the event? What are their emotions? Truly, what do they think about the event being staged there? How does it feel compared to having it in Sweden or Norway or any other democracy?
Yeah.
I would ask the same to FIFA when we come to Qatar in November. We've had a number of incidents in China with, we all know, tennis players vanishing, and nobody talks about it today. What's happening? And we travel there, and the athletes are being told not to raise any concerns or questions. Is this really how we want to have it? Officially, they would say, "Oh, it's great. We love to have it here, and everything's great." But
of course,
it must feel awkward, and it's not giving me any positive emotions when I start. I will, of course, follow it. I will not boycott it. I will support the Swedish athletes there and the teams. But, it will not be an ordinary Olympics, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I couldn't agree with you more. And I've heard stories now that the athletes going there will not they will not be allowed to bring their own phones. They will get phones upon arrival, which will be destroyed when they leave. And I mean, this just talks to that this is not a democracy.
No. Where are we? And you could blame COVID. No, it's not COVID. This is something else but the democracy. So, mixed emotions for me following the event, of course.
Definitely. Yeah, that would be very interesting. I will keep that in mind and see if I could find someone within the IOC.
Yeah, well, I think they will be busy with other things, but good luck at least. I think it would be interesting to hear their thoughts.
Thank you. Finally, is there something that I haven't asked you that you would like to mention?
Well, no, I don't think so. As you understand, I could talk a lot about many things, but I think you covered most the topics that were of interest, and I'm honored to be a guest of your show, and I wish you all the best in the future.
Thank you so much, and I wish you the best with the translation of the book. And for the Swedish people that listen, Korthuset, it's amazing. I was at the bookstore and there was a woman in front of me buying the book, and the cashier said, "Oh, you're buying this one like everyone is doing." So it seems to be doing well. And I really hope that you manage to translate it so that more people can read your story.
Thank you very much. I hope so too. And I wish everyone a nice reading when they have the opportunity to do so.
Thank you for listening to the Sports Management Podcast. Please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any upcoming episodes. Also, feel free to leave a comment about what you thought about this episode. If you want to get in contact with me, send an email to sportsmpodcast@gmail.com or hit me up on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram @sportsmpodcast.